All righty. We are live right now. It is 8 p.m. Central Time, 9:01, it's actually 8:01 and 9:01 on the East Coast. We've got a very special guest this evening, Ms. Jennifer McWilliams, and she's going to educate us a little bit on SEL and CRT and the relationship between the two. And with me right now is Shane. How you doing, Shane?
I'm doing well. I'm actually kind of excited about tonight.
Yeah, I'm very interested in it, and I don't have a lot of experience with the SEL. CRT has been in the news. People have heard that. They kind of, I don't even know if people it's been in the news, and they've heard of it a lot more than they have SEL.
Well, and there's such a movement that's building across the United States, and people really don't understand what that movement is.
Yeah.
Because we were seeing the SEL, CRT in the schools, and we're hearing about it in the news, and people are showing up to school boards. But as one of our other guests tonight will talk about, he's been in the thick of it, and with me having minor or children 6 and under, it's kind of hard for me to really relate to a lot of it, but I know as my kids are growing older, this stuff is not something that I want them taught. So, I hope I learn a lot from.
You got to pay attention so you know what how to deal with this and how to see it. We also have Troy Prozan. He's with us. He's with the Erie County, Pennsylvania movement out there, a coalition of parents fighting for your kids' rights. And how you doing, Troy?
Good. How you doing, Manny? Hey, Shane. How you doing?
Pretty good. Yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you. Hey, thanks for sharing that Moms for Liberty link on the Patriots News Network page. We appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. Any of those links you guys send, go ahead and send them over. I'll put them up. Shoot, I'll even make you an admin on the page just so you can post them yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you very much. Like I said, we really appreciate it.
All right. So without further ado, let's bring on Ms. Jennifer McWilliams. Hi, Jennifer.
Hello. How are you guys?
Good.
Awesome. How are you doing? So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you find yourself, I don't want to call it a predicament, but in this position that you are right now on educating people. And you can tell some of us who don't know what SEL is or CRT or the relationship for that matter, but we'll get deeper into it a little bit later.
Sure. So, I obviously, like most of us, didn't have any intention of jumping into this, especially full time. But back in 2019, I actually had taken a job at a elementary school here in Indiana, and I was a reading instructor. And when our school year started, I had worked off and on and stayed home for quite a while with my children. So when I was getting back to my career as a teacher, there was a lot of changes that had taken place. And when the school year started, I noticed a huge emphasis on a program that was fairly new. We were in, I think back now, it was the third year of bringing this program into our school. And at first, it just kind of seemed like another, I don't know, kind of, silly bandwagon that maybe the education system jumped on and it'll fade out like a lot of them have. But the focus of our meetings and what was going on within the school, they were always centered around this program. And so I got to really start researching what was going on with this. And I don't know if you have covered much about the teachers union on here, but at the same time, there's a movement called Red for Ed, it's the teachers union, and they were really big in our state at the time. And so they were really making a lot of noise. I was not a member of the union. And I just started looking into what was going on and what they were saying. And as I researched this new program that they were all very supportive of, and the teachers union was supportive of, I became extremely concerned about it. And I know we'll go into it a little bit, but just to give your audience a little bit of context, I'm a teacher, but I am also a parent first. And so in my personal time away from school, I started, it was at the time just a Facebook group, and to start a conversation in the community about what was going on. And it really took off, especially with some of the pushback that the teachers union was getting at the time in our state. And my school had talked to me about it. They were not, I don't believe they were thrilled with me, you know, kind of starting a Facebook group, kind of countering some of the things that was going on in the education system. But at the same time, I said, look, you've got teachers from the union out being very outspoken about what's going on in education. And, you know, I have the right to do the same thing. It's just whether or not it aligns with what, you know, they want or not. Of course, they agreed with me. So this went on for a while, and the group really started to get some attention. And it wasn't until February of 2020 that I had come across a blog post that was written about the program that was at my school. And it was truthful because I worked in the school, so I knew that the concerns within it were accurate, and I posted it. I did that on a Monday, and on Friday, actually on Valentine's Day.
Yeah, I was gonna say of 2020, yeah. Right?
In 2020, my school called me into the office, and they fired me for doing that. So it was at that moment that I realized, you know, this is much bigger than I even realized. And that just really took me on a new path. And I started digging into the program, obviously, that we're going to talk about tonight. It was a social emotional learning program. And I just, you know, it's one of those things that once you understand it, you can't look away from it. And you know the dangers that are coming to this country and to these children if we don't speak up. And since then, I have just really kind of taken this on. I took it on in the state of Indiana for quite a long time, and then I have stepped away in the last few months to try to bring this message nationally. And so that's how I got here. So I do have a federal First Amendment case against my school. We're almost 2 years into that now. So, but I am fighting back. I always say, as long as we have our First Amendment, we need to use it.
Absolutely. So did you use, now you have your own consulting firm, right? Did you start this since you left, since they let you go at the school?
I ran the, so I took the Facebook group that I started, I turned it into a nonprofit, and was able to grow that organization across our state. We have active members in all 92 counties of the state of Indiana. And it was back in the fall. So back in November, I was seeing all of the attention that education is getting right now across our country. And I'm seeing all of these things coming in, and I'm like, you know, I can connect the dots here for these people. And so that's when I realized I wanted to step away and start taking this to a national level, so I can help, you know, on a bigger level than what I was doing.
Yeah, somebody's asking, what's the name of the Facebook group? It's still a page, I imagine, a group.
It is. It's still an organization. It's Purple for Parents Indiana.
Purple for Parents Indiana. Awesome. And so tell us, okay, SEL, for those who are hearing this for the first time and they may not know anything about it, what exactly, explain SEL to us, I guess.
Yeah. So it's a monster, I will tell you. But SEL stands for social emotional learning. And I'll just, at a basic level, if you ask your school, or the information that school districts, really at all levels, community, state, federal levels, are putting out, is that social emotional learning is a way to teach children how to be empathetic, how to build relationships, and how to manage their emotions. And that sounds nice. And because of this nice language, they were able to get very far with this. But what it actually is, and we can talk more about it, it is, social emotional learning has transformed our education system. And it's been going for quite a while, but in the last 6 years, it's really taken off in our country. I have talked to a lot of people across this country, and I have not been able to find a single public school system that does not use SEL in some form. I'm not saying it's not out there, and if there is, good for them. But and I should say the social emotional learning from a specific castle, which is what we can talk about. But the social emotional learning has transformed our education system, and what it really is the psychological manipulation of your children through this education transformation to adopt and view our country through a critical race theory viewpoint. And so I tell people critical race theory, if you've covered this with your audience, critical race theory is the ideology, but social emotional learning is the delivery system of it into our education system. And so, I'm sure you have listeners that go to their school districts and demand, why are you teaching critical race theory to my children? And the school districts they're playing a game with parents. But they are able to, for the most part, unless you're out in California or something, say, we're not teaching them critical race theory. But what they've done is they have transformed the entire education system so that these children are bombarded with this ideology all day through whether it be lessons, curricular activities, clubs, anything. Everything now has to filter through social emotional learning. And social emotional learning is a system, it is a theory, and everything comes through the school system through what they call an equity lens. And when you hear equity and equity lens, what they're talking about is everything filters through the viewpoint and how someone who believes the critical race theory, how they would want these things to be taught. And so that is what people.
And it's funny when you mentioned the word children when you were just saying just now, and everything I've heard of recently about critical race theory is, well, this is only being taught in universities. Mm-hmm. This is not at the elementary school level, but that's not true, is it?
No, that's what they say. That's what for a long time, and that's why, the whole conversation across our country on critical race theory was absolutely necessary. People need to understand it, and I do want to just in case someone's that's listening is a little bit confused about it. I'm not going into a detail, but if someone believes the critical race theory, what they believe is that our country was founded on oppression and racism, and that every system, everything, the way that our entire country works, capitalism, everything is to uphold white supremacy.
Right.
And that is what they believe. And they believe in order to fix that, they have to dismantle those systems. And there's not a couple systems that they think are oppressive. They believe every single system and every policy that we have is oppressive. So what they're doing is, if you're a critical race theorist, they want to train people to become activists for this cause and start dismantling our country. So that's important for this conversation for people to understand when we're talking about the critical race theory ideology. But now I got on a tangent and I forget what you asked me, so I'm sorry.
Oh no, the only thing I asked was, the professionals, educators will say, oh, it doesn't exist. It's only in school, in higher learning, not in elementary schools.
Right. So what they did is, in the universities, they taught what this theory is. They taught it as truth. And now we have teachers and administrators who have went through that process. And I tell people, they are not teaching your children what critical race theory is. They don't go into the classrooms in K through 12. Again, unless you might, California may be doing this, or some of those very progressive states, but they don't go to these children and say, there is a theory in the world and this is what some people believe. That's not what's happening. They've used the theory and they've transformed our entire education system with the theory, so that they are training children to become what they would call, and this is their words, agents for social change.
Social justice warriors.
That's exactly what they're doing. It's if your children are going to public schools with SEL, they're training them to be social justice warriors. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and tell us why social emotional learning. So, like you said, it sounds nice and sweet on the cover, but it's not so nice and sweet. It is. I mean, in your discussions that I've watched, it's been referred to as it's actually kind of dangerous.
It's extremely dangerous, and I mean, it's quite literally a thought reform brainwashing program. It's a 12-year brainwashing program for our children, and it's very well disguised. And I have had many conversations, even with teachers, that so when you bring social emotional learning into your school, and most of your listeners, I sure have seen some kind of language out of it, but may not realize that's what it is. It is supposed to take over every aspect of your school, everything. And so if you have a teacher so it really opens the door for very progressive teachers to be able to really push the agenda. If you have a teacher who doesn't believe in that agenda, but wants to keep their job, and they're just doing the minimum of the lessons that they're supposed to do, or at least meeting the criteria for their position, a lot of them don't even realize until I'm able to show them and explain to them, you're still part of the process. Those children in your classroom that year may get a little bit of a break because you're not shoving it down their throats, but you're still taking part in this process. And so when you transform an education system around that theory with the idea of shifting, they will say, the lens of the children, the way they view the world, there's only one conclusion, and that is that they are going to graduate. They're going to go into the workforce. They are going to become our doctors, our lawyers, our legislators, and they are going to do exactly what they believe is true. This ideology and this thought that our country is systemically oppressive is not taught and not influenced as just an idea. It's taught to them and influenced to them as truth. And so that's what they will believe.
Troy, you're hearing all this. You got elementary school age kids, right?
Yeah, 7 years old. He hasn't been in school since pre-K because of the COVID because of their COVID policies. And he's going to be going into second grade in the fall, and he probably won't be going back to school. He's doing a charter academy right now because of everything that's been going on. Is it fair to say that COVID funds are funding the SEL programs? And because I noticed, we have, I don't know what you guys have in Indiana, but in PA, there's the ESSER funds through the ARP. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that, so in-person learning was obviously the most disruptive for the kids. That was the thing that everybody said that they wanted the kids to have back, was in-person learning. But that's what they lost. They lost the in-person learning. But all the COVID money that the schools are getting, that's actually the least amount of money is going to replace the in-person learning, to make up for that. It's actually, most of the money is going towards SEL, social emotional learning. Is that fair to say?
It is. And so I want people to make sure they understand it did not solely come in because of the ESSER grants, but the ESSER grants from COVID were required, and I believe it was something like 20% of that grant money that the schools received had to go towards it would say something like social and emotional mental wellness or something like that. But that is what they're talking about, is social emotional learning. So, it's crazy because they're taking American tax money. They are then giving it to our education system, who then spends it to manipulate our children to be against our country.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what it sounds like.
But it did come in. It social emotional learning in a lot of schools. So for a long time, so the government, absolutely, an education department has helped fund this and everything. But another way that it's pouring into the schools is a lot of grants. And you can look at whatever your school district is. I would file a FOIA and get any grants that you have received, especially in the last 5-6 years, and then really go through the documents of those grants and see what was required of those grants. Because I will tell you, here in Indiana, we have a Eli Lilly pharmaceutical company. It's the biggest pharmaceutical company, I think, in the country. And they have a foundation that is their nonprofit foundation, the Lilly. Sorry, it's escaping me right now. But the Lilly Endowment. And back in 2016, 2017, now this has happened all over the country. So this is why everybody should be looking out for these places that are providing this money as grants. But they provided a massive amount of grant money to our education system here in Indiana. You had to apply for it. All of the schools applied for it. And it was millions of dollars. And within those millions of dollars of grant money was the requirement that you had to bring in, they will not tell you it has to be a social emotional learning program. What they will say is a evidence-based social emotional system or program to meet the needs of the children. It's very innocuous, but all of the schools go directly to the one source and get their information and then choose a SEL program that matches that. And so it all operates the same. And what's really concerning is that this grant money, when the schools received it, they had to get these evidence-based programs. So you're talking bringing in the SEL. And then they also were required to start collecting mental health data on our children. And that data goes to the Lilly Endowment, which I have to be very clear is separate from the Eli Lilly, but it's their offshoot of their foundation. So, people that are very involved with a huge pharmaceutical company is now collecting mental health data on children. And it's all connected. But so if I was a parent or somebody listening to this and you want to know exactly what's going on and what's required of your schools, I would really start looking at grants that they have received and grants that are coming in.
Yeah, that's with the Eli Lilly. I mean, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
They're a gigantic corporation.
Mm-hmm. And the schools here the schools here, just to be clear, the schools here that did not receive that grant, that were not chosen as recipients of that, there's many organizations that had stepped up as well and offered some amount. Obviously, they couldn't counter the Lilly Endowment, but so it was similar contracts with that grant money, and they would offer, so schools could apply for other grants through other areas, and it often has to do with mental health facilities and that whole area that was giving these grants. Yeah, and then once it's once it's in the system, it's transformed your whole education system. It continues. It's not something that just goes on for a year and stops.
It's just there. Once it's in, like you said, once it's in, it's in. What is it? Are teachers, or I don't know, I guess in some schools they have counselors, and just was one of the questions I saw in one of your videos. How are they? We'll call it weaponizing. How are they using this as a tool against the kids, which they don't even know? The kids don't know anything.
Yeah. So as far as so we can go at different levels here, but the teachers, especially ones that are behind this agenda. When they brought in social emotional learning, it goes directly with what is called culturally responsive teaching. It's the other CRT. And if your audience wants to ask, if you want to ask your school in a roundabout way that they will have trouble explaining, don't ask them if they're teaching critical race theory. Ask them if they're using culturally responsive teaching. And the answer is yes, if they understand what they're doing. And culturally responsive teaching was coined by a woman by the name of Gloria Ladson-Billings. She is a self-proclaimed critical race theorist who is heavily involved with education. In fact, back in like 94, 95, she wrote a book called The Dream Keepers, and it was about our country being systemically oppressive. And then she had a couple journals that came out, and one of them was towards a critical race theory of education, and then she followed up with what she coined, and it was toward a culturally relevant pedagogy, I think, of education. But it is her teaching method that our schools now use, and it's culturally responsive teaching. If you are a culturally responsive teacher, you are to use lessons and push this ideology onto the children. I'll give you an example. So if you go to a school and you ask for the curriculum and you're combing through it and you're looking for critical race theory, you're probably not going to find it. Social emotional learning is not a curriculum. It's a system or a program that runs alongside of the curriculum. So if you have a third grader, this is an example directly from an example that was referenced from Gloria Ladson-Billings when she was trying to teach what this means. So if you have a math lesson for your third grade students, and it says, you are going to get on the bus, you're going to ride into town, go to work, and then you're going to get back on the bus and come back home, calculate how much your bus fare would be for the day. I mean, it's a typical, we've all been in school. That's how the math problems go, story problems go. But if you're a culturally responsive teacher, you then engage the students. And I'm not saying they do this with every problem, but this is what it is. You are supposed to engage the students into a more social aspect of what that problem means. So you would say, and this is going to be depending on where you live. In Indiana, a lot of people drive cars. I know people are from areas where buses or subways are very popular. So it's going to depend on where you live. But you would say, why would someone have to ride the bus to work? And some people have cars. And you get the children to start talking about, well, my mommy has to ride the bus. And then you have another child that says, well, my mom has a car. We have 2 cars. And so then the teacher, if you're culturally responsive, should allow the children to have a discussion and kind of guide them along to find that we're not all equal. And so that is an example of what culturally responsive teaching is. And that is where if you're watching education across the country, there's parents that are like, what just happened? My child just came home with a paper to write, or my child came home saying this. Why are we learning this in math? Or why are we learning this in art? And it's because of culturally responsive teaching. It's because those teachers are doing what they're supposed to do to be culturally responsive. When you talk about the counseling services, that is another entryway of this into the schools. The counseling services I'll proceed with caution. I know there are a lot of counselors that want to do good and want to help children, and we all realize that there are children that come to school that have experienced trauma, and so we don't want to alienate them or exclude them. We realize that, but the counseling services that they are trained through and the position statements that are coming out of the counseling, the American School Counseling Association, are extremely radical, extremely progressive. And so the counselors play a huge part in transforming the culture that the children go to school in. So that's another way that the children are receiving this this bombardment of this ideology. It's overwhelming.
It's fascinating. Yeah, it is actually. It's
overwhelming, and quite frankly, it's scary. I have 5
Mm-hmm.
children, 6 and under, that are my oldest 2 are already in first grade and kindergarten. And we got to deal with that with one of the teachers. And I had a conversation. Both teachers are definitely on the right, but it's just like, okay, any form of this, we need to make sure that my kids aren't learning. And if you guys see this in the curriculum, you guys are going to you'll notify us, right? And they said, oh yeah. Well, we just found out 2 days ago that they've been teaching this SEL stuff in the school to kindergarten and first graders. And well, the reason I have my green screen up is I'm moving. We are completely changing location. We're going to a different school district that I know they don't have that. So
if I can,
I'm
yeah.
in South Dakota.
So this, okay. So when I was fired from a extremely rural town here in Indiana. We don't even have a stoplight in our town. So, I mean, this is everywhere. And I hope there are school districts that I've not been made aware of that don't use this. But if you go to your school, and even and it's amazing, but you can still go to schools and ask them, do you have social emotional learning? And they will say, nope, we don't. I don't know what SEL is. The problem is that social emotional learning is the foundation, but there are tons of programs, and they all use different language, but they all follow the same framework. So my school used one called, that I mentioned, Leader in Me. There are, you can look up a list of SEL programs, and they're everywhere. So there's second steps, there's conscious discipline, there's tons of them. And people just don't recognize them from district to district or even school to school because the programs are different and they use different language.
Conscious discipline. That's one that Head Start. So the Head Start program nationwide is required to teach conscious discipline.
Yeah.
And the only reason I know this is because I was actually on the board. And I didn't know what it was. And I'm sorry to say that I voted to allow it. You are
not alone. And even when I was working in the school, it was difficult to, I was like, something's going on here. What is wrong? But it took a lot of research and really just like dedicating myself to digging into it to understand what was happening. I believe there are people, or I know there are a lot of people all across our country that it sounds nice. They sound nice. It sounds like it's going to be helpful. And that's why it's so important for what you're doing now, is raising, concern over this, because there are a lot of people that still say, no, that's not what we're doing. We're doing this. But everything that I'm telling you, everything I'm saying, I can back up and I can prove it. It's just, they make it very complicated. It's taken, I'm literally over 2 years of just constant research to understand all of this. And so that's why, I really just want to help people and advance their understanding of it, because it took so long for me to get where I'm at. We don't have time for that. We're running out of time. And so, this has happened to so many people, so many well-meaning people.
And, it's funny you talk about not having a whole lot of time. There was a Soviet defector, Yuri Asmanov, from the 1960s. There's when he came and defected to the United States, he said all you need to change a generation is 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
5 years is enough to brainwash an entire generation of children.
Sounds right. So when you talk to these parents, I mean, I imagine you've talked to a huge amount of parents.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of feedback do you get from them when they're first hearing about this and first learning about what's going on? I mean,
shock and fear. They're afraid. They're afraid because they've put their children, and I'm not putting this on anybody. I'm just saying, we've allowed ourselves to trust the education system, that even though, you see a lesson, you hear something, it's just mostly isolated. And when I show them and I explain to them that the whole system has adopted this and transformed around it, it's that they're afraid, they're fearful. But I think in our country, we can't be afraid. We just have to start standing up. And so I try to give some hope, because I want people to understand, when I started speaking out on this in 2019, people thought I had absolutely lost my mind. They're like, what is wrong with this woman? Like, she's mad because we're teaching children how to get along. I'm like, no, that's not what we're doing. So now, I'm here with you guys, and I'm able to speak, and people are waking up. And people, even though don't understand or may not even understand that social emotional learning is the umbrella, that is the Trojan horse, they know something is very wrong in the education system. And so we have to keep helping them connect the dots. But yeah, often I don't, not, this isn't a joke, but I always say, yeah, I go in and people are excited to hear me speak. And then I'm like the bad news bears, because I leave and some people are, people are shocked and really upset. But I want to give them tools that they have and knowledge that they have, and help them catch up faster than it took me to understand all of this, because we have to do something.
I have a question for you. So what is CASEL?
Mm-hmm.
And is there are there programs under CASEL that, like, is it that umbrella out of that into like different districts, or like what should parents look for? Is there how many different programs are there? Is there like 10, 15, or is there like a top 5? Like, what do they look for in the schools? You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, so CASEL stands for the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. That is a nonprofit organization that started back in 1994. They are responsible for coining the term and defining what social emotional learning is. Back when I was in school, 80s and 90s, we had things like character education and stuff like that. Even though some people had issues with that back then, through my research that I understand, but they took a hold of something like that, where they were really just trying to teach, basically the golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated. And they took that idea, they created social emotional learning, they defined it in very nice terms, and they created a framework. And the framework is what I know there are one, maybe two that I know of SEL programs out there that say they do not follow CASEL. So I always have to have a disclaimer. If not, you'll get so many messages. But if there's SEL in your school, I would about 99% guarantee they're using CASEL's framework. So CASEL provides the framework and what social emotional learning is, the definition of it, and how it works. Then you have it's basically like think of a pyramid scheme. And so you have CASEL, and then you have all of these programs popping up from different organizations. Second Steps is one. It's a very popular one. So Second Steps then uses CASEL's framework and definition. And CASEL has a ton of information on their website. I mean, a ton. And so they are really the puppet masters on how SEL is to be implemented into the school. So they're providing the framework, and then you have a ton of SEL programs. And the SEL programs, there are well over 80 programs.
Wow.
You can find some of them. CASEL has a tiered system where they kind of give some of the programs stamp of approval. So if they're doing really good, if you're in their top tier of CASEL and your school's using that SEL program, your alarm bells should be flying off, going off, because that's definitely not good. So you can find on their website programs, and it'll pull up and it'll show you a list of, I think, about almost 80. But there are a lot of programs that are not listed by CASEL, but they still use CASEL. They may be waiting to get approved by CASEL to be on their list. I'm not sure. But there are so many of them, and this is what has people so confused.
Yeah, I'm looking at their website now.
Yeah.
There's like 86 programs under.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
And CASEL is they are funded by I could give you a guess. Bill Gates, Chan Zuckerberg initiative, and other top globalist organizations is who is funding this. So when they brought in SEL into the schools and it transformed the system, and then they transformed everything these kids are being introduced to through the framework from CASEL, they gave the keys of our education system over to Bill Gates and Zuckerberg's. And one of the founders of CASEL is a Rockefeller. And so social emotional learning, they defined back in 1994. In 2020, they decided, so our schools not only brought in something into the schools that is very concerning, but they also brought in something that is allowing the people and the founders and leadership of CASEL to move the goalposts as they need. So in 2020, CASEL decided they needed to update their definition. And so they changed it. They changed the definition. It's like if you knew 2 + 2 was 4, they decided in 2020, now it's 2 + 2 is 6. And they just added more to it. So then those programs that get approved from CASEL, if they wanted to uphold their tier status with CASEL, they had to then move their goalposts within the school as well, based on this definition update.
Yeah, that's quite a.
Yeah. So if you're on there, if you want underneath fundamentals of SEL, this is really this is important. Framework. If you go to the framework, yeah, right there. And you scroll down a little more, you'll find there you go, the circle. Yep. Okay, so this is the framework that I was talking about that all of the SEL programs use. So if your school has SEL, and even if they tell you they don't, ask them how they're meeting this. They have to meet social emotional learning or social and emotional wellness needs some way. So ask them how they're doing that. They'll probably give you, we have this program called, Second Steps. It's fantastic. Then dig into those programs or those systems, because what you will find as you dig through the websites is this. You will find this framework. We talked about this language game that they're playing, and I want to remind everyone, all of this sounds nice, but this is all coming through an equity lens. So when they're teaching your children self-awareness and self-management, that is through an equity lens. That's why you're seeing such a emphasis right now on identities within the school, because they have to get these children to understand that they have an identity and what their identities are, because they have to get children to understand that their identities are dependent on how they affect society. So you're either an oppressor or you're privileged. Now, they don't tell the children this, especially at a young age, but they influence this heavily with the math lesson I talked about, the books that they read. And so once you get children to understand these identities, and that everyone's identity falls within a category of oppressed or privilege, you will start to influence them to make responsible decisions. Who doesn't want their children to make responsible decisions. I sure do, but not like they are saying, because the responsible decision making is based on what category you fall into. You need to start making decisions based on if you're an oppressor or if you're privileged. And so they influence this through lessons and the culture of the school. This is the building relationships part of what they will tell parents they're doing. And so then, it's even color coded. You kind of have to move them around from orange to yellow, and then you get them around to green. And this is these skills, relationship skills, or competencies. And social awareness is where they really push on the idea of becoming agents of social change. So now you have children understanding their identities, that you have children understanding that they need to start making responsible decisions based on those identities. And you move them around and you teach them how to become responsible citizens and dismantle systems. This is a critical risk theory framework that they're using.
Wow.
And the reason the rings, so it started from the inside out. It goes from the inside out. When I was trying to sound the alarm, it's because SEL was only beginning, for the most part, really starting to explode when I was going, hey guys, we have a problem here. But I was seeing it from the inside. So, and this was before COVID. The classrooms and schools are on the inside rings. And so that's why I was seeing it and other people were not able to see it. You're seeing it now everywhere because we have completely saturated the education system, and we have moved out to pushing this onto adult, they call it adult SEL, to the families and caregivers. And then the community ring should really concern people, because the community ring is the kind of the final stage of where they're pushing this. And if you look at your state and what the education department's doing, they are going to start using these competencies, social emotional learning competencies or skills, and they're starting to call them employability skills. And so your children must learn how to be woke. And then they're calling that the employability skills. And the community, the businesses and stuff that are starting to take this on, which we're seeing everywhere, are aligning with this agenda right now.
Unbelievable. I'm going to see if this is going to let me go to the page where I saw we were talking about the different here, selecting an SEL program.
Are you aware of any
look at all the 86 here? Yeah, you can go ahead and chat. I'll just scroll through this.
Are you aware of any states or any school districts that are or like parents that are challenging their school districts against this?
Yes. So, I mean, obviously there's these parent groups, fantastic, going against this. I am aware of a couple places right now that, and I apologize, but I can't say any more than that. I know a couple that are getting ready to come out swinging on this. On the states, if you live in a state that ban critical race theory, they're still teaching, they're still doing it. It's just under this language.
Right.
And I fully believe and thankfully have been able to help in some of these cases, hopefully that will explode and we can, take this across country. But they're violating those bans, they're violating those laws. And not only that, this is a First Amendment violation for everyone. Our government cannot come in and work to shift the mindsets and the lens of our children. And I believe that it is fully. It's just, it is complicated. So it takes a lot to get, to the root of what's going on. But so that's what they're doing. And I believe everybody should be pushing back hard on this. I mean, there should be lawsuits all across this country.
Yeah, this is crazy. Well, I don't know what it's like in your state, but I know in our state, the teachers union, they like to fund the politicians to get them to push their ideology into the schools. So I know at least here it's coming from the teachers union. They're the biggest problem. I think they are the problem.
Oh, absolutely. The teachers union is fully backs this. And I think I said in the beginning that one of my things that I started kind of being concerned about was the teachers union movement. And I said, then I started kind of really looking into, okay, well, they're supporting this, and I think this is kind of weird. So what's going on? But they have a ton of influence. They have, that they absolutely are. And so if there are teachers listening, and you don't stand for this, you have the right to get out of that union. And that's what really you need to do. And there are options available for you that you don't want to be part of that. So you just have to find them. But they absolutely push this. And it's concerning, very concerning.
So they didn't, I want to just clear something up too that I said in the beginning. I don't believe that they used COVID to put this into the schools. I believe that they used COVID funding to help push it along.
They did. Yes, they did.
That's what I believe that they've done.
Mm-hmm. Well, those ESSER grants, I would think it would be the same everywhere, but I believe here in Indiana, the schools that took that had to use 20% of those grants towards this.
I think you're right. I think it's 20%, and I know that 8% went towards the loss of in-person learning, which is strange to me because, like I said, that's the most important thing for the kids was not being there and not learning anything, and they're using resources as like that's like the last part of that where the money's going. Like that's where the least amount of money's going. Where that's where all the money should be going, or a good majority of it. I know here too in Pennsylvania where there's staff shortages everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Teachers, counselors. I'm kind of guessing that this is the way it is throughout the whole United States. But again, I can't speak for other states because I don't know. But what it's like, where you are, where Shane is, or even you, Manny, I don't know what it's like there with you. Have you heard, is it a lot of staff shortages there?
There is in in this particular school district, is a Brownsville Independent School District. Yeah, lots of staff shortage. They're looking for, the basics, even substitute teachers. They can't get people to fill those positions, and you're having staff, administrative staff, they're being assigned classrooms and to do all that, and it's still not enough. It's just it's a huge shortage right now.
Yeah, that's consistent everywhere. On the money, Troy, that they're putting into SEL, Castle, the idea behind social emotional learning is that it should take precedence over academics. Okay, so they're pushing this over academics. When Castle put out a video a few years ago, kind of introducing social emotional learning, I think it might have been in 2006, and they literally say, children have, and now don't quote me, but they basically say that children have the internet. They can Google information. They don't need to know who won the war. They don't have to know things anymore. That they're coming to school now to learn their purpose in life. And the founders of Castle put out a book back in, Castle was founded in 94. In 97, they put out their first book, promoting social emotional learning. And in the book, they argue for promoting this across the country and say that the schools are the one best place for children to go to have a responsible adult in their life. So they're replacing the academics with this ideology. That's why they are going to start pushing this as the employability skills they need to graduate.
Wow.
And that seems kind of funny because as an employer myself, If people come with this woke garbage, I tell them right there's a door. There's an individual that we've been talking, or I've been talking to, trying to get him on. He was general manager of a Dollar General in Alabama, who was fired for not allowing his employees to have their boyfriend / significant other at the store with them while they were working.
Equity.
So,
Equity.
I mean, I thought that was common sense, but
well, if you're not allowing that, Shane, then you're being oppressive.
Oh boy.
So
I guess I'm one of the biggest oppressors out there then.
Is this where this equality and inclusion is kind of like everything seems like it just all rolls together?
It does. So critical race theory would be the ideology. SEL would be the delivery system and what they have brought in to transform it. DEI, but I hope people stop calling it that and start calling it DIE, because everything that it touches dies. But when they DIE is the marketing scheme, it's all together. Yeah, it makes it sound nice, right? Don't you want to be inclusive? Shouldn't we be diverse? But it's quite literally the opposite of what they say. You can just pretty much say, what's the opposite? And that's what's happening.
I'm just curious because this is, I'm listening to everything you're saying. And I remember going in school and listening to Jim Crow era films. And I really look at it like the 1960s South, segregated and divided by race and identities. Is that pretty much what we're dealing with here?
Yeah.
In
yes.
the segregation of society? Yes,
they're using social emotional learning to what we're heading straight off the communism cliff if this continues. But they are creating this, and honestly, this is a Marxist revolution. And in order to create this chaos that they need in our country, they have to divide us. And that's exactly what they're trying to do, is to put everybody in a category and pit them against each other. And, we have plenty of adults that can't see through that. Imagine what these young children are going through and understanding. When you go to school, children, I can tell you, I worked at the elementary school off and on for a long time. Those kids come in there, they're innocent, and they trust you as their teacher. They believe that. What do you tell your children? I did the same thing. I said, my child's scared to start kindergarten. And what do I say? It's okay. You can trust your teacher. Right. These children are going in there and they are, they're open. I want to use my words correctly here, but they are sponges for this, and they are victims of this. And so for parents that are afraid to speak up, imagine what your children are going through. Speak up, because if we don't, our children are not going to know the country like we want them to know it. They will not. They will fight against it.
Yeah, definitely. As we start to wrap up, right before we'll finish up by looking at some of the comments and the questions down here. But one of the things I was going to ask you is, what do you, I guess your message, what do you tell parents? What should we tell parents? What needs to be, what do parents need to hear about this?
They need to understand that what is being said to them through the education system is not it is not reality. It is they're if they are giving the schools the benefit of the doubt, and oftentimes, right, we run around our communities with these people. These people, these teachers. They might be your neighbor. They might, and so I'm not trying to pit us against everybody in our community. but the system and what's happening there is not what they are telling you. And so, if you have people, like, obviously all of us are willing to speak up. And I think what people need to hear right now is, do not give labels any power. Over the last 2 years, I have been called so many things that I am not. And our country has been conditioned to kind of shade away from that, because nobody wants to be called any, labeled anything. But I tell them, imagine what your children are going to go through if you are not willing to have some courage and stand up. But I do believe in this country. I think, throughout time, it's frightening, but throughout time, there have been times in our country where we weren't sure if America was going to come out of it, and we did. And so this is our time to preserve this country, and we have to save our children.
Yeah. And what can parents do? What can they do? Is there a national organization that they can inquire with or join? What's something easy for them to do?
Sure. So obviously education, we are still working all levels. So we have to, at the ground game, educate people, because it's very confusing. So this is a great way to do this. Parent groups within school districts to get in there and start speaking up consistently, going to those school boards. The elections, we have to take over the school boards. You have to take over all of the positions, that for anyone that's, saying, well, this is kind of good. It's not good. It is not a battle that we will win tomorrow, but we have to start taking back our systems at all levels. So I have a website, jennifermcwilliamsconsulting.com, and I have a lot of information on there, and I do information and talk to people all across the country and travel. But there is, and also there's a resource that people can sign up for. It's new, and it is going to be producing a lot of things very soon, that I will tell you that I would back 100% and it's called Courage is a Habit. So if you go to courageisahabit.org, put in your email, they're not going to spam you or anything, but they are starting to send out tools for parents. And these tools are very useful for parents. If you're a parent and you don't know what, if your school's doing this, go there, get the PDF. They will send you a PDF of just questions, and you can go and ask your school. And it'll start to get you on that path. And I do know there are a lot more tools coming soon.
I can pop that up here on the screen so everybody knows what we're looking at here.
And the other thing too, Manny, that parents need to look out for are surveys. School districts love to send surveys to kids.
Surveys are huge, and I do go over that in my presentations. Opt your children out of surveys, even if they look innocent. They will tell you it's to help the school culture. They're not. And you opt your children out of all surveys, because that data is following your children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is great. Fear is a habit. Each time you want to speak up and you do not, it becomes a little easier the next time to stay silent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, Shane, let's hit some of these comments or questions that have been sitting there for just a little bit.
I think we hit this one at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But let's just hit it one more time for those that have not seen it real quick.
Yeah, what was the name of that Facebook group you mentioned earlier?
It's Purple for Parents Indiana. Purple for Parents has several chapters, so you might look for yours in your state. Arizona has a huge one. That's where it first started.
Okay. Somebody thanking you for the information. And then
yeah.
I'm just gonna click through these.
Race. I've always said, it's been said before, and that's something I believe. Kids are not born racist. Racism is something that's learned from parents or from others. And I think that it seems like with CRT, it's taking us backwards, kind of undoing everything that's been accomplished in the last 40 or 50 years. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So now they're wanting to brainwash the innocent children. Thank you so much for the support information. Yes, thank you, Susan. All right, next one, Shane. Let's see. Who funds these? Yeah, who funds these? You kind of mentioned already who funds these organizations.
Zuckerberg, the Gates. Now the like Leader in Me and Second Steps. They're all through different supported by different organizations. Second Steps is with the National Equity group, maybe. I'm sorry, I can't think of the name right now. I have so many names going on in my head, but you go right to their site, and it's like Dismantle America, basically.
So if you're a superintendent, writes a book called Radical Empathy, there's a good chance he's implementing SEL.
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah, I'd definitely say so for sure. Can Ms. Jennifer give an example on critical race theory and how it's incorporated in, let's say, we'll just call it like mathematics? Is that something they are incorporating into these lessons with CRT?
Yeah, so that's what I was kind of given an example of when you use culturally responsive teaching with the math lesson on like a bus. It is being, like I said, SEL is a system change, so it has to be incorporated into everything. And so in English literature class, that's a huge one that it pours through, as well as social studies. But the English literature class, you can just have children, choose a book, give them an article, and you can focus on some aspects that wouldn't connect to critical race theory, but the story that they're getting, the narrative that they're getting to learn this will be filtered through that CRT or equity lens.
Got it.
And people should really pay attention to the libraries and the resources that they're using. A very popular resource, and there's many of them, but there's one called Newsella, and they say it's just a research base. The kids just go on there, and you can tell them, pull up an article on whatever, maybe your interest, whatever you're gonna do this summer. It could be anything. And they'll go on there and research, pull up an article, and then they have to maybe write a persuasion essay for that. But Newsella is they specifically pick narratives. Counter storytelling is a tenet of critical race theory. So they believe that they have to use resources and books and lessons that counter storytell, so tell the opposite of what children and people have traditionally known in our country. Books and lessons.
Oops.
All right, gonna hit the next one. Shane, can you hit that next star comment? James Russell says, we, the people, need to put God back in school and kick the communist liberalism out of the United States for good, and definitely of our schools for sure. Michael Page, maybe parents need to start their own schools. Yeah, and what happened with school boards? School boards originally all parents that were on the school boards?
It started out that way, but Manny, again, if we go back to the 70s, early 70s, that's when you seen the modern left really started taking power in the schools back in the 70s, because they understood that in order to change the generation that we're in now, they had to start way back.
I'm watching these, I've watched our own school board here locally. I've watched with Troy, his school board, the shenanigans that go on there. And I'm thinking, all these school board members are supposed to be parents looking out for the kids, but that's like the opposite's happening, where all of a sudden it's each one is carrying out their own agenda instead of what it's supposed to be doing is let's protect these kids. It's like, when did that happen? How did that happen without anybody noticing?
I think for a long time, even though this, school board's so important. A lot of times in elections in the past, people didn't pay that much attention to it. But the teachers union certainly did. They made sure they started getting people in the right places. And just over time, it's really been taken over by people that either align with this or they brought in SEL and they're on the board and didn't know, right? And now, I said, hey, put your pride down. Like, say if you're wrong, you're wrong. We got to do something. But people are hooked into these school board association, superintendent association, and they all align with the teachers union. So they all have these shackles on them. And so that's why it's so important for elections are so important. And I know, some people may not have a lot of faith in that right now, but it's still our process and it's still what we have to do. Because I do know in some areas, they are starting to change the school board elections from being elected to appointed. And that is a problem. And if your school board is about to be appointed, everybody should be down there raising hell.
Yeah, I agree.
Wow. That's why I can't stress enough that parents need to get more involved. Yeah, I don't know how else to put that. Any other ones, Shane?
No, those are the rest of the starred comments.
Okay.
But
Troy,
you asked how we got to the place that we're in. Doug, Cherry, very astute point, not vetting everybody in every position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And honestly, we're in political election season, and between Manny and I, now that this move is just about done, I think we're going to be shining a light, pretty big spotlight on that. At least I will be.
Yeah.
Troy, you got anything else before we wrap it up here tonight? Anything else?
No, I mean, I'm gonna be working with her on Saturday, so I mean, she answered.
Okay.
I think that she answered the base of the questions that a lot of parents have. But like Shane said, and you said, Manny, parents just got to wake up. I think that they're just not involved enough, and it starts in the community. And once you start in your community and getting a movement going, like I was telling you, Jennifer, in an email, like we have grassroots coalitions here. We have 13 school districts, and every one of them has a grassroots coalition. And we started this movement a couple of years ago, when they started masking the kids and stuff, which I've been saying for the past 2 years that it's been nothing but indoctrination. And I kind of felt like fighting to get the masks off the kids was like a distraction. Like they were distracting us with that and kind of like backdooring other things. Because now it's like all these other things are coming out, and we're like, whoa, wait a minute. Now I feel like we're fighting so many things at one time.
And here's a comment. Yeah, CRT is only taught in some college classes, not K through 12 public school. That's
go back and re-listen.
That's one of those we talked about that earlier in this discussion that this is what they're going to keep saying is that it's not a K through 12, it's only in universities.
Yeah,
And,
ask your schools if they're using culturally responsive teaching. Ask them that.
Yeah. And go back and pay attention to the rest of the broadcast.
Yeah, you might want to watch this again. There's CRT, and then there's the other CRT, which you just said, culturally responsive teaching.
Yeah. Yep. And, it is which is the praxis of critical race theory into our education system through social emotional learning. Take it to the bank.
Yeah. So I think if you don't think this is going on in your K through 12, then you need to actually get more involved. You need to wake up a little and start asking questions. Jennifer, I can't thank you enough for being here and giving us some of your knowledge. I'm definitely going to look into this a whole lot more, and possibly sometime in the future, I might bring you back again and let's delve a little bit deeper and maybe get some more parent participation and that kind of thing.
Well, and from myself, I would definitely like to see you back a lot more.
Sure.
So
yeah, this is, like I said in the beginning, this is a monster. So that, I hope I'm giving at least enough for people to go, wait a minute, I need to look into this. But yeah, I appreciate the platform. I appreciate what you guys are doing. So important.
Yeah,
well,
thank you.
anytime,
Thank you for your
anytime
time.
you just reach out. You have my number now. You just reach out and say, hey,
Okay.
I want to come on.
Yeah,
All
at some
right.
point in the future, I'll reach back out, or if you've got something that came up, or you want to tell a story or a situation, we'll be glad to accommodate you. Jennifer McWillams, again, your website is jennifermcwilliamsconsulting.com. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
And
my
if you
Twitter
wanna,
handle is right there in the corner.
there you go. So you can reach her at Jen_N_MCW. And or go to jennifermcwilliamsconsulting.com and read up on her there. You can contact her there as well if you wanted to come out possibly and speak with some of y'all. Troy, thank you so much for participating. Shane, thanks as always. Jennifer,
Thank you, guys.
Again, Jennifer McWilliams, and thank you so much for giving us just a little over an hour of your time. I know you're a busy lady.
Yeah,
And,
no problem.
We look forward to having you back again.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Thank you very much.
Everyone, have a great night. If you have any questions on CRT or SEL, filter them through the website, through the group, the Patriot News Network, or me personally directly, or Shane personally directly, or even Troy personally or directly, and we'll make sure you get some answers. Have a good night, everyone. Have a good Tuesday evening.